believe that North Korea has conducted another nuclear test in defiance of international sanctions. Reports suggest it may be Pyongyang's fifth and biggest test so far. A seismic event, magnitude 5.3, has been recorded near North Korea's main test site. In the northeast of the country, South Korean experts believe the tremors were not a natural event. The North's nuclear ambitions are a major concern, of course, for the rest of the world, particularly, though, for its neighbours. And Japan's Prime Minister has said that if the test is confirmed, Tokyo will protest strongly to Pyongyang. In a moment, we'll be talking to John Sudworth in Beijing. But first, let's speak to the BBC's Steve Evans in the South Korean capital, Seoul. And, Steve, what more details do we have at this stage?
We are pretty sure now that the test, or the tremors, were a test. The South Korean military is talking as though it's got pretty firm information. The equivalent of 10 kilotons of TNT, which is about twice the size of the previous biggest test. That's the same magnitude, slightly smaller than the Hiroshima bomb, for example, but clearly a significant device. The government here in South Korea is organising all kinds of emergency meetings. There's been condemnation. The government here is certainly working on the basis that it was not an earthquake, that it was a test.
And suggestions that it may have been a hydrogen bomb. And I seem to remember there was talk of this in January. What's the significance of that?
The significance of a hydrogen bomb is that you get much more bang for your weight. In the previous test, Kim Jong-un or the media in North Korea were saying it was a hydrogen device. There was some scepticism from outside experts about that. Some outside experts thought that actually it was a conventional nuclear device which you need to trigger the hydrogen device, but the hydrogen bit hadn't gone off. If it is a hydrogen device, it is an advance in their technology. Having said all that, a device being blown up underground is not a nuclear bomb. There are bits, or it's not a deliverable nuclear bomb, rather. There are different bits of the process, like the missiles, like getting that into a warhead that can go on top of a missile that can leave the Earth's atmosphere and come back in. They are not at that stage yet, but they are clearly making progress, and the outside experts would say that we're looking at years, perhaps not that many years, rather than decades before North Korea has a nuclear warhead and the missiles to take that warhead across oceans, say to the west coast of the United States.
Steve, many thanks to BBC. Steve Evans live for us in the South Korean capital, Seoul. So let's see how North Korea has been developing its nuclear capability. North Korea has conducted 4 underground nuclear tests so far. In October 2006, Pyongyang announced its first nuclear explosion. Like all the subsequent tests, it was underground in tunnels dug into a remote mountainous site called Pyongyang-ri in the northeast. The second test in May 2009 was bigger, an estimated yield of 2.8 kilotons. North Korea said it had achieved a higher level in terms of its explosive power and technology. In February 2013, unusual seismic activity was again detected around Pyongyang-ri. The North said it had tested a miniaturized and lighter nuclear device with greater explosive force than previously. And in January 2016, reports of an artificial quake in North Korea, magnitude about 5.1, turned out to be evidence of a 4th nuclear test. Kim Jong-un later announced the first successful test of a hydrogen bomb. A short time ago, Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe gave his first reaction to what's happened.
If North Korea did carry out a nuclear test, it is something absolutely inadmissible. We need to and will strongly protest against their actions. Japan is currently a member of the UN Security Council, so we will also work closely with New York, if this nuclear test was indeed carried out, to figure out how best to react to this situation.
Well, that's the initial response in Tokyo. Let's get reaction from China now, and our correspondent John Sudworth, who's in Beijing for us. John, has there been any official reaction there?
There hasn't. yet from the Chinese government. I think we expect that will come later in the day, and my guess will be that we'll hear condemnation from Beijing. Don't forget, China put its weight behind the toughened sanctions regime authorized by the Security Council following North Korea's fourth nuclear test back in January that you've been speaking about. And I think China will signal its displeasure again. At the moment, all we know, though, is that the normal emergency response measures have been activated. Don't forget, this test site is quite a short distance from the Chinese border. They will be monitoring for radiation leaks in those areas, and reports suggest that some schools close to that border have been evacuated.
What sort of pressure can China exert on North Korea aside from those international sanctions?
Well, you know, it's interesting, James, that the fact that China has now thrown its weight behind toughened sanctions is seen by many as a significant step forward. But, you know, the debate will continue. There are many who will suggest that once again, this fifth nuclear test, if it is confirmed to be North Korea's most powerful yet, will be proof that punishment, sanctions, tough action doesn't work. In fact, if anything, it could be argued it only provokes North Korea, backs it further into a corner. There are others, though, who will say that the real problem is not the fact that China states publicly that it backs toughened actions and sanctions, but that it is less than wholehearted in enforcing those sanctions. China is North Korea's only real ally. North Korea depends on China for that lifeline, trade, fuel, vital supplies of food flowing across that northern border, without which it could not survive. And there are plenty of reports to suggest that despite the toughened language, much of that has continued.
John, many thanks. John Sutherworth live for us in Beijing.